Today we're joined by the director and co-writer of upcoming horror film Pensive, Mr. Jonas Trukanas. How are you doing, Jonas?
Hello, thank you. I'm very good.
Yes, it's great to have you here, and we're very privileged to be joined by you here just to talk about your film. So, Pensive itself, it's recently featured in numerous festivals, not just FrightFest in Glasgow. How do you think the festival circuit's been working out for you so far? Has it been fairly positive, the taken with the film?
Yeah, I mean, it has. It has. I'd be lying if I say that we expected, to be in so many festivals and big festivals as well. Both like Black Nights and Torino, and then Fright Fest now, and we have a couple more on the agenda as well in the future. So it's very exciting for us. It's very exciting to share the film with the different audiences as well.
Yeah, and that's the best way of the films to be experienced, in my view. The way I viewed it, I just viewed it via screener, but I can only imagine, being in amongst a crowd and an audience and just being swept up by the film and just being taken on an absolute thrill ride because, it goes without saying, I really, really enjoyed this film. So,
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
it's, yeah, no, thank you. So yeah, basically, just a brief introduction about the film itself for those less watching the video on our channel. It's basically a slasher in which a group of high school students, after their graduation, decide to go for a party in a remote cabin in the woods. But it's not everything is as it seems, as the sort of surrounding areas got a lot of these statues, wooden statues. There's sort of anonymous connotation to it. And with their partying begins shenanigans, which leads to desecration of these statues, which leads to the introduction of this masked figure who decides to take everyone out one by one in all bloody mayhem and glory. So on paper, it sounds like a typical slasher, but it is that inclusion of the sort of one statues that sort of introduces a bit of a folk horror element to the film. So where exactly did the idea of including that come from, or was it the statues the beginning, or was it to begin with a slasher? What's the origins of the film as such?
I think we started with the statues. That was the original image that came into our minds. Before even speaking about the form or a slasher or anything else for that matter. So, these statues, they actually, the story is actually that we have quite a lot, like it comes from this thing which is called Pensive Christ. It's a type of statue that we have in the region, in the sort of Central European region, which is actually just a wooden statue of Jesus Christ. But the interesting thing is that you can find them in really secluded places in Lithuania and alike, like in the middle of a forest or something like that. And whenever you come up on it, it's very scary sometimes. You are just walking in the forest and you take a turn and there's a sad Jesus Christ looking at you. So I think it started like that, just us sharing the memories of this weird statues and the encounters that we had with them. Although in the film it's not referenced in that particular way of it being the Pensive Christ, it's just the wooden statue, so to say. But that was the beginning and the inspiration, and slasher and the whole subgenre came afterwards. Like we knew it's going to be a horror film from the
Yeah.
start, because that's what I've been aiming to do. But yeah, so it started with the statues.
Yeah, well, that's the thing as well. Actually, it's not really something that's maybe just specific to Lithuania. Like even in the countryside here in Northern Ireland, you could be just driving down the road and then all of a sudden there's one of these like holy statues. Maybe not specifically, the statue of Christ, but it can take you back for a second and, instill that sense of fear. But so the idea is sort of sitting around the high school graduation and you have these group of eclectic characters, on paper, this seems like a typical, slashers. Like, you've got the jock, you've got the smart person, you've got, somebody who's sort of uncertain of their future and so on and so forth. But what I really enjoy in what you do, they are those sort of cliches and stereotypes, but you just add enough to them to make them slightly different. Do you add the insecurities that come with being a teenager? That really shines through, and that's what makes you latch onto these characters. So how did you find, even like say the casting process and trying to find the right actors for to tackle not only like these cliche these archetypes, sorry, but sort of instill these nuances in and around the characters?
I think overall that was the aim from the get-go, because I sometimes feel that in film in general, if we play with archetypes, if we play with stereotypes that the people expect the film to have, especially like slasher, which is a very clear formula. Sometimes it gets devoid of humanity in general, because you're not trying to create people. You're playing with stereotypes, with people made of, I don't know, plastic or something like, so that was the idea from the get-go, to create people that might not necessarily act according to the formula of a slasher, but be somewhat of a representation of these roles that you're used to seeing in the films. And as for the cast, we actually, when we started the casting, we looked at the characters pretty loosely. Like, we didn't have like a visual description. Okay, this needs to be, this guy needs to be, I don't know, black haired and had the smirk or something like that. I mean, for some of them we did a little bit, but we looked at it pretty loosely in the way that we wanted to create the characters with the actors, together with the actors. And what's also super important for us was that we not only create them as like a singular entities, but also try to work with the class as a whole, because they function like a unit. Because like in a school, you have these grievances that you might have suffered like 5 years ago, and you still remember them. And these little things were very important to us to create like a, I have to believe that it's people who spent, because in Lithuania you spent 12 years together in a secondary school. So that was the idea. These people spent 12 years together, and they've seen each other change throughout this time, and they've been friends, lovers, they hated each other, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that was a lot of work was done with the actors as well, and with the backstory. And in the casting, we just looked for, I think yeah, just with some people it obviously just clicks, and you look at them and you see, yeah, this is my guy, or this is my girl, and this is what we want to have. And obviously we tested the chemistry of them together as well.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, that was sort of leaning on to my next question. What sort of rehearsal time did you have? Given that this is a relatively small film and it can be quite difficult, within budget constraints and that, to usually go ahead with something like that there.
Actually, frankly, we had quite a limited time to shoot it. So, but what I knew and what we asked of actors, and it was very generous of them to actually give us time to rehearse it, because we rehearsed the hell out of it. We tried to rehearse. I don't know, it was 120 hours, something like that. Yeah, I think our production manager counted, because we had to do the work where I work with every single one of them. Then we work with relationships, so like one character against another character. Then we work all together. Just to try to build that, as I said, to build that sort of the idea that these people have been together for a very long time. So we tried to rehearse a lot, because we knew that we have a very limited time to shoot. And also, it's a first feature for me. I've done shorts before, but it was obvious to me that I have to work with actors in the rehearsals till the time that if we speak about the scene where there are like 8 characters involved, and two of them are the main ones, so to say. The other 6, they sort of need to know what they need to do without me telling them, and this is the work that we had to do before. So they feel completely safe in the world that we are trying to create.
Yeah. So, as you've alluded to, this is your debut feature. How did you find that jump from going from, the work in commercials as well as, very short films? How did you find that leap from that sort of small arena to this larger area?
I think you obviously, as a director, when you study film, when you graduate from university, you always dream about the first feature. Like it's a dream. Like, and for me it was like what was it, 11 years since my graduation from the university. When I made it, I obviously tried to make one before. It didn't go off. And I think the idea that I had is that it's obviously similar to short films, it's similar to commercials. It's like it's the same thing. You prepare, you know what you're doing, you go in, you do it. But obviously the scope of it is, I think that it's hard to fathom until you try it, because you need to think, like, you need to live in the past, present, and future at the same time. And I think that was, I didn't think it will be easy, and I don't think that anyone thinks that, that it's going to be just a walk in the park. but it took some time for me to get used for the pure scope of and it's not. I think I was lost for a while as well when we were in the pre-production stage. I was like, I had all these things that I need to do, and I don't know where to start, and no one can tell me because I have to decide myself what I do next. But but after initial experience of just being overwhelmed, I think I got through with how should it work? Because yeah, in the essence it's the same, but like it requires more mental fortitude, and it requires more. The scope is just bigger in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was overall. But then even though it is like complicated, and obviously you have all these emotions because you want yourself to succeed really badly, but also the pure experience, because we had like a brilliant crew and cast, and everybody supported each other throughout the shoot. So that was actually a really fun experience altogether, that I will remember for the rest of my life.
No, that's great because the thing about it is, even watching it, you wouldn't think for a second this is a debut feature. There's a lot of confidence in behind, the way the film's portrayed and that. I've seen films from directors that have done like 6 or 7 features, and they're nowhere near as, comes closest to, you know, seeming very professional and very refined, for a low budget film. And that's something that really, captured me when I was watching it. But
Yeah, but I think that's also a thing, that we knew like how much money we had in general, and we sat down really with the technical crew, and we were like, what can we do? Obviously coming from me first, but then speaking to everyone, what can we do in order not to make it look cheap, in order not to make it look amateurish, because we know we don't have money to do it like in a proper way. We
yeah,
don't have money to do, huge practical effects. We don't have that. But what can we do to in a way hide some of it, to cheat some of it,
yeah.
and to make it look concise?
Well, that's the thing as well. There's actually one particular sequence I wanted to bring up. It's the scene in which the majority of the characters are trying to make their escape and they're in the car, and you've this fantastic 360 shot, and like it was moments like that there, you're like, this is what elevates Pensive above any sort of standard slasher fare. So where did you come up with the idea of doing something like that? Because it really sort of induces the panic of the moment.
Yeah, actually, well, it was obviously that comes from the dialogue with the DOP, Rokas, who's a brilliant guy who really he did everything he could to make it look good. And
Well,
we
he did
shot
anyway. Yeah.
yeah, and we shot a lot of night scenes, and it's like always complicated with light and with the weather conditions. But with that particular scene, it's funny you mentioned that, because I think that was the one shot in the whole film that we spent like a half of day rehearsing, and we actually had like a lot of time to shoot it. Like this was the only shot that we sat down with first AD and we said, look, we need almost a full day to do that shot, to do that scene, like the whole scene, because it's obviously very important, and as well we wanted to have that effect of panic, and this is why the camera spins around and you look at the people. And also the idea was not to reveal too much, and you want to be in with the characters at that certain point, not to jump and see what the killer does at that moment. You want to be there in like this very claustrophobic environment. So this is why we chose to spin around and just stay in the car for the whole scene.
Yeah. Well, sort of just going back to characters again, that's one thing I really appreciate about the film is that basically half of it is just spent establishing these characters and getting used to them and their interactions and relationships with each other. And I think in doing that, and by not sort of playing your hand and revealing the killer too much, that's what heightens, the sense of fear and sort of dread in and around the film. So was that sort of a conscious decision on your part to just sort of pull back and sort of the killer aspect of things, early on in the film? Because you sort of tease it in the prologue, but beyond that, there it's really just sparse until the latter half of the film.
It was a conscious decision, and also, I think even when we're writing it, we sort of knew that the film needs to flip in the middle of it. Um, but also it only made sense for us because it's, you know, it's a character piece. So if you don't feel for the characters as a spectator or as a creator for that matter, you know, like, then it doesn't make sense, you know. And we need to spend time to give ourselves the opportunity to show you these characters and showcase their fears, their wants, their dreams. And it was, you know, a very conscious decision, obviously, you know. I think, but also, I mean, the time constraints, another thing, you know, we knew
Yeah,
what we can do.
exactly.
So looking back at it, yes, maybe it could have actually benefited for some of the mention of the killer early in the film as well. Um, but um, but I think it's actually, for me at least, this is what makes it interesting as well, because till the middle of film we saw it as a coming of age film, really, you know.
Mhm.
And that was the idea as well, to start and go like this, and you know,
Yeah.
not to show too much, and yeah, and also a conscious decision about budgetary constraints.
Yeah.
But that was secondary. That was not as
Oh
important
yeah.
as just the thing that we want the audience to recognize this character.
Well, that's the thing. When you mention it's a coming of age, you definitely get that through the central character, Marius. You know, he's uncertain about his future. He doesn't really know what he wants. He sees like what his fellow classmates are up to and their future plans. You know, like there's the basketball player who's, possibly going to be playing in the NBA, and other characters are going on to do different things. But he's sort of stuck at a crossroads where he's like, well, where do I go from here? And it's with this event, you would assume, oh, he's going to rise to the occasion, he's going to be the hero. But without spoiling anything, the decisions he makes, although some of them are very questionable, at the same time, they sort of seem real and honest, if that makes sense.
Well, it's very, you know, very generous of you to say that as well, because that was always the idea. Because when, you know, I think again with the slasher mythos, and in general, you sort of, the audience sort of expects there to be a hero. But if you look at it from not a formula perspective, like not from the perspective of the formula, but just looking at the, you know, the human aspect of the film, um, I think that mostly, even look, thinking about myself, like if I was in a situation like that, I would love to think that I would take like heroic decisions, but probably I wouldn't. Like, I have to be honest, probably I would run. You know, I would, you know, a killer. Whoa, well, you know, I'm off.
Oh, the same
And
here.
yeah, well, I mean, this is how it works, and we wanted to have a character who sort of thinks. And it's interesting because obviously people can hardly relate to him, but for me, he's the most relatable character in the whole film. You know,
Yeah.
yep, because purely because these decisions he makes, they are not, you know, as you said, they are not great decisions, like, you know, questionable morality there, but I think, and even when writing, we, you know, we try to not we tried not to imply the formula too much, but just go with the character and think, okay, what would this person do in this particular situation? You know, what would he say? What would he cheat? Would he lie? Would he run away? I mean, let's talk about that and just try to go with that rather than stick to the formula.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It does take that slasher framework and what you expect from it, but then it adds, those extra layers of realism to it, which sort of, grips you into the situation itself. But I just actually want to ask you as well about the location itself. Like, how difficult was it not only finding it but working within that area?
So it was actually when, when we started scouting for locations, we, realized that obviously we probably need to buy a country cabin, not to like rent it, not to, we obviously didn't have the money for the studio bill.
Yeah,
But so we had to buy the cabin, and then luckily one of the film producers said that, look, I have this, like, he has a piece of land and there's an old cabin there, which was, I don't know, haven't been lived in for like 5 years. There's just, it just sat there. So we said, okay, let's go and check it out. And it's like when we arrived there, it was like, I don't know, leaking and with water, and there was no door, and the windows were like, it was scary already, right? And
yeah,
the good thing was that we could trash that location like completely. So we decided to shoot there. And yeah, without spoiling too much, we pretty much destroy it at the end of the film. But also, it was in such a bad condition that we had to fix it first. in order for it to be quite presentable. So our production designer lived like almost 2 months. For 2 months, he lived there fixing it with himself and with his crew, just going every single day, almost like building a house from scratches.
Just the
And then we
opposite.
crashed during the filming, but that was, but also like what most of these people did during the shoot. You can't, like, I can't expect people to do this because nobody, we can't ask for the person to go and live in the middle of, nowhere for a month and a half and fix a cottage. But that was the only way to do it. That was the only way to do it. And our production designer was fine with that. He actually even suggested that that's the only way we can pull this off. And yeah, and it's interesting because it's also like Lithuania is a small country, but it was quite the location, the actual location was quite like there is not much things around it, like it's quite secluded in a way. And we lived there, all of us, in nearby, not on the actual location, but like in the
Yeah.
little hostels around. And it actually interesting because it helped us to transport like all of us, the crew, the cast, into the world of the film, because you don't get back home, you live there all the time,
Yeah.
and so that actually I think that gave quite a bit to the actual mood of a film.
Yeah. No, no, and just speaking on mood, another thing I want to touch upon was the score used in the film. It has this nice duality between, the techno sort of music that sort of is surrounding the party and the cabinet, and then as well as there's sort of like a sort of a soundscape that sort of induces this atmosphere of dread in around the film. So what was your sort of thinking in and around that there, and in terms of your work with the composer?
So the idea was that we obviously we wanted to represent like the youth and the techno stage, because this is what what we hear, what they listen to is what we hear in the film. But also we wanted the soundtrack to evolve almost at the same time as the action evolves. So you first hear techno, and then we add in these folk instruments in a way that do represent the coming of a killer. And then eventually it flips completely to the folk instruments, and the techno is gone altogether. So that's also the development of the action, so to say. And the composer, he's actually Andrius. He's actually a very well-known Lithuanian electronic music artist and a DJ. So the idea was, and I've worked with him before, but for this, I think he was just perfect because we used a lot of the tracks he created but never released in this film. So we haven't created all of it. Some of it was just like he pulled off. I recorded this 5 years ago. I haven't released it anywhere. I think it works here. And from what we created, I remember just us sitting in the studio and we had this whole ideas about how every scene develops. And then I think we tried to make it too complicated at first. And we were just listening to it, and it was all jumbled and chaotic. And I was like, something is wrong. Like, we need to do something. And then Andrius, he got like this Lithuanian instrument which is called kankles, which is just like a old wooden string instrument. And he just like played one note over and over again. And I was like, yeah, let's do that. Because like, it's not like, again, I think the music in the horror films, it almost serves, you almost teach the viewer in a way that if you hear a certain sound first in one particular scene, the next time that sound comes again, even though you don't understand it like consciously, but it brings some sort of idea, because I think our response to music is very obviously emotional as an audience.
Yeah.
And we try to play with that. We try to okay, this is the killer, so if we, for the first time, you hear the soundtrack of a killer, then although killer is not in the screen and we start to play the same soundtrack, the audience will feel that something's probably coming.
Yeah, exactly. You get that feeling he's constantly around and that you could attack at any time. But just sort of speaking about the killer itself, that's more related to the kills. What I really, really enjoyed was the fact that, how these statues are desecrated sort of reflects the way people are killed. Like, at first I was thinking, once that clicked, I was thinking, oh no, this is going to happen to this person and that person. So you could tell that, yourself and your writing partner had a lot of fun injecting that sort of element into it, and then the execution of it as well.
Oh, absolutely. You know, my co-writer is Titus, and he's a director as well. He just released his first debut feature as well, which is a comedy. And he is really known for this comedic approach to everything he does. And he's a very, very fun and professional guy. So I think, we actually spoke even today with him that, we would start writing something. And obviously, at some point, you get stuck. You just go like, like, what should we do now? How should it continue? And so what we did then, we were like, okay, let's talk about the kills. If we get stuck, let's just have fun and talk about the kills. And now we can push this guy, we can punch this guy with a skewer, and we can do something like that and something like this. And that was for us, that was, obviously, if we're talking about reality, these are horrible things. But for us, we just talk from purely like a cinematic point of view, and I think we had the most fun with it. And I remember one story that Titus, my co-writer, keeps telling is that we spent quite a bit of time like meeting in the cafes and just not to sit in the office and just drink coffee and discuss and brainstorm and talk about the script. And I have this very loud voice. I basically scream when I talk. I can't do nothing about it. That's who I am. So sitting in the cafe, we would start screaming. I would start screaming about the kills, and the people around us would just be like, "What the hell these guys are talking about?" Because we could drown this guy in the toilet. Yeah, and Titus was just like sitting there and trying to lower my voice down. So, but yeah, that was really really fun. And obviously, as to the kills themselves, coming back to it, we wanted to have a morality to it, like almost a morality to the killer. So to say that he's not just this bloodthirsty maniac who wants to, kill everyone. And obviously in the horror films, you always, in the genre, there is a very clear causation between sin and like the punishment. In general, in slashes, you could say, sex is a sin, and then the punishment is obviously, being horribly mauled by one of the many great killers that we have. For us, we wanted this causality to be very clear in the way that, they desecrated something that's sacred to someone.
Yeah, and that definitely shines through whenever you see it, because not only, like you say, it takes that morality, but it takes it a little step further and makes it a bit more personal in how, the teenagers are dispatched eventually. But I think we'll sort of start to wrap things up a bit, but I know Pensive has a release for Screenbox in the US. Is there any word for it being released in the UK anytime soon, or Europe in general?
Yeah, we do. Actually, we have quite a few deals. We will have a theater release in Latin America, of all places.
Oh,
which is quite. We already had a theatrical release in Lithuania. Then through states it goes to Screenbox. We have a distribution in the UK. I'm not sure where it's gonna go. It's probably gonna be one of the VODs, not a theatrical release. But we do have a distribution partner in the UK at the moment, and
well,
in other parts of Europe as well.
yeah. Well, as soon as we hear word of it, we'll do our best to promote it as much as possible, because, like I said, I really really enjoyed the film, and I want as many people as possible to see it. Especially when we're in an age where you get a slew of slashers which just follow same beats and formulas. When something like this comes along, it's a breath of fresh air. So without further ado, I just want to say thanks very much for your time, Jonas.
Thank you, Joseph. Yes, thank you. It was great. Thank you for your questions.
Yes, and thank you everyone for watching, and stay tuned for Pensive. Whenever it comes out, we'll keep you up to date on that. Thanks now. Bye bye.